All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're good. Go ahead.
All right. Good evening. It is 6:01 p.m. on Tuesday, November 19th, and I will call to order a special meeting of the Millwood City Council. At this time, could we do a roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Beasy? Can you hear me, Shauna?
Here. Here.
Councilmember Color?
Here.
Councilmember Van Hees?
Here.
Councilmember Sander?
Here.
Councilmember Stravens?
Present.
Mayor Freeman?
Present. Please let the record reflect that we have a quorum with 4 members present in person and 1 member present virtually. Thank you very much. So at this time, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Wurst, can you lead us tonight?
Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. So, since this is a special meeting, the agenda is fixed. So what you see on the agenda before you is what the meeting is, and we can not change or vary from that. So do we have any public comments for tonight's meeting that have been received?
No.
Okay, and then, I'm sorry, public comments concerning any of the action items, and we only have 1 action item tonight. Do we need an executive session before tonight's meeting? Okay, thank you very much. And so at this time, this brings us straight to our action items for consideration, which is Ordinance 546, the 2025 budget. This is a public hearing. And at the end, following closure of that meeting, public hearing, we will ask the council for to consider this for action. So, Ms. Mackin, do you want to begin?
Okay.
Bye, Sean.
Did she see?
Yes, she'll be able to see that.
She'll be able to see on her screen. Okay. Okay, next, you can just go to the first slide. Nothing has changed since the last meeting, not a darn thing. So all the change will be later. Everything's still the same. You saw this last month. There's your property taxes, sales tax in the general fund. I did move your committed balance down so you can see that separately. So for total revenues of the system or the general fund are seen at the bottom there. Then if you go to the next slide, down. Yeah. No. Sorry, up one. There's your ending balance committed, and you can see how it's going down, but we're doing a lot of capital projects, so you can expect that. Now you can go down. Here's your REIT. I just kind of feel it necessary to remind you that these are funds that you can use. So the first being less restrictive, but they could be used for something if you so choose. Next slide. And there's your capital projects. So you see Argonne, obviously. If you have any questions about those, I went over them with the guys. The playground toy replacement, that's to replace the merry-go-round that busted and we can't continue to fix it because insurance says no. And then they noticed that the splash pad needs some rehabbing. Some of the jets aren't working, and you know, it's been around for a while, so it needs some rehab. And then the water system plants are still in there. So there's the breakdown between the funds. And that's all I have for you today.
No.
Well, I do.
So
Go
why don't
back
you
down to the joint utility.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, this is all showing the shortcomings, the operating split out, the capital. Rather than show 3 funds, I stuck it all in the fund, one fund, but I did separate out the committed the operating, the treatment, the capital. So there are the revenues of the system at the bottom, and the next slide will be your expenses of the system. No ending balance, there is no capital ending, because we would use it all up. So that would be your ending balance in your utility fund. I'm gonna let the mayor take over.
So questions on this before
Jeff,
I
do you
go
have
in,
questions before?
before I go into the water presentation? Because I do have a presentation cooked up for water rates that, right now what we have is we have a budget that you can consider and pass, but it shows a zero balance in utility capital fund and a significantly declining year-over-year balance in the funds as a whole. And so that is something we have to correct. And so this next part of the presentation is going to be here for you folks to consider in time for the regular meeting in December. So if you have questions on anything that Debbie presented, particularly in the general fund or any of the capital projects, I would suggest the council ask those now.
So Debbie, the question I have is, so go back one slide. So we have that 200, I think it's 200,000.
Yes,
Yep, so,
Keep going back one more.
yep,
there it is.
it's environmental and design, 200,000. I would propose to council, we decrease that to 175,000. And let Welch Comer figure out how to do it for 175 versus 200,000. She said there's cost overruns, things like that.
I don't necessarily know if that gets to the heart of the problem. All that does is leave some money in the capital fund. It leaves about $25,000 in the capital fund, and I would say that's more of a. I would offer that if you approve it and you want to there's two ways you can go on this. I would suggest you either strike the environmental and the design for the cast iron in totality, and then potentially add it to the budget or add it to the 2025 budget as a budget amendment next year if that makes you feel better, or leave it in there and you can choose not to spend it if you wish not to spend it. I don't think reducing it, I think that shows that was an estimate, and I think that if the idea is you either have faith in the estimate and use that as a budgetary placeholder, or you don't. That's just my suggestion after all the years of doing this. I would say that those are the two ways to go. Either that is too much money now out of utilities and you don't want to fund it now and you strike it, and then if you decide you want to fund it, then you can take a bid, and if we figure we can allocate the funds in 2025, we could do so then. Or you leave it in there, and if it looks lean and you don't want to spend it, you don't have to spend it and you don't have to authorize it. It just sits in there as something that wasn't done. But I still am gonna go through these water rates because $200,000 is not gonna do anything to keep us from continuing to decline in the funds.
So here's my experience. So here's where I'm coming from, is last meeting, I think in water utilities, we were down 26,000. Roughly.
Right, roughly.
So to make it balance, my experience, so this is a business type experience. If we budget 200,000, it'll come in at 200,000. Right? If we budget 175. What I'd like to get rid of is be in the black, not in the red. And so take that red and bring it back to black. So, right,
Well,
does that
and-
make sense?
But you would do that by just not spending it. And if you can negotiate with them, I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room
So we can
there.
allocate the funds, and then when it comes down to it, if we don't wanna do it, we'll say,
Don't approve it, yeah. No,
Okay.
that's all you have to do.
I would think that,
Or you can strike it and we can put it back later.
I would think that our mayor has some ability to negotiate down from 200. I mean, when we look at it, it's environmental design, 200,000. And our water system updates also 25,000. That's 225,000 to Welch Comer. Right?
Well, it's not all to Welch Comer. The environmental's gonna be somebody doing the archaeology, somebody doing the geotech, somebody doing, the environmental review, thank you. There's other things, it's, I think as, if it was one long line, if it was one long pipeline down the middle of some road somewhere, that would be one thing. What we have is we have a lot of discrete areas that are going to take their own set of review and design. It's basically four, do we have 4 areas or 5 areas of CI?
Let's see, we have it over there, we have it there.
I think it's, let's say 5. Let's say 5.
I think so. There's,
It's basically it's 5 small projects that we are wrapping up in a bow to try and get some cost savings on effort.
yeah,
And so if we did each project individually, which we have the absolute process to do, we've got to get we've got to get all the other contractors 5 different times. We've got to get all the base designs 5 different times. So it's really just, it's the idea of bringing it forward as one large project was the intent to get some economy of scale at doing it all at once. So that's why I think that it's either don't strike it and figure it out later, or keep it in, and then if they bring the cost estimate in that says it's gonna cost us X number of dollars to prepare the plan, and you look at that and go, that's too much, we don't wanna approve that, don't approve it. And just sit on it, or figure it out, or approve half of it, or approve some of it, or something like that. But I don't think that is their true bid. I think that was a good faith estimate on Welch Comer's part for us to be able to, for planning, this is a planning purpose number. This is a level 5 cost estimate. This is opinion of probable cost, not a cost estimate.
Okay. And I do, let the record reflect, I support that. I think we need to take care of water. In terms of how's it work with utilities? So our last meeting, you said that ideally, we don't have any issues with the state or any other agency or anything like that for having a cost overrun of 26,000. We're okay?
it's a problem.
Oh, it is a problem. So,
It's
so
a problem.
if it's a problem, do we need to take that then, the budget
So,
out? Can we?
I,
So that was my solution, is to say, okay, it's a problem, so let's reduce how much we allocate to Welch Comer by X amount and say, you guys come up with it.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
so we have different facets of problems going on because we aren't really meeting our revenue. Our operating is not paying for our operating, not in water, not in sewer. And the capital is not paying for our capital, not in water, not in sewer. So eventually we are going to be in hot water. Yeah, and possibly this year is what I'm saying.
Shauna, you had a question.
Yeah.
Yes, much to what Kelly's saying, although I did hear your feedback, we don't want to parcel it. It's hard for me knowing that we have a perpetual problem that's complex to approve something and say, oh, but you know, if it comes in magically under budget, we'll just not spend that money. I agree. I think I agree with what Kelly just said. I'm also very committed to us doing capital improvements and looking at, you know, our sustainable water. But much to what the mayor just said, perhaps we remove it from this budget, but still prioritize it as an item that we are going to tackle in 2025 so that we can pass a balanced budget and then commit to getting deeper planning, you know, having actual, you know, the public utilities folks here to be able to ask some questions about, you know, is there priority projects within this big bundled project? Find out what our options are to potentially drive down costs. But I think if you vote for a big budget and then say, oh, but we'll hope it magically just gets shaved down in the next year, that's much to what Kelly said. That's never been my business experience.
Speaking to the Capitol, the guys, you know, there are wants, but not necessarily needs. So I know the mayor would love to see the city hall get painted because it's awful and we've been talking about it for 3 years. But if we throw that out, we throw that out,
But
you know?
but I think at that point, what we're doing is we're playing numbers games.
Yes, we are.
We're shaving money off of capital improvements so we don't look like we have a problem with our operating revenues.
Right.
And that's the thing. That's why I guess if you have more questions, otherwise what I'd like to do is kind of plow through this next stage. I do agree though with Shauna and I agree with Kelly. I think if there is significant heartburn on the bottom line, it's just better to dump that cast iron design, leave it off, and then you guys can consider it in 2025 if things get better, or you can push it to 2026. As Mr. Sander noted, we have significant system losses. What are we at, 13%?
That was 18.
18%.
Yeah.
So that is something that has to be addressed because in looking at this, a significant amount of what we pay for in variable costs is power to pump. And if we're pumping water that we are not delivering into the system, that's flesh and money. So at some point we need to address the CI pipe.
Yes.
But maybe addressing it as part of the 2025 budget right as we're passing it is not the time. I will say that taking it off makes us better, but it doesn't address the underlying issues.
It doesn't fix it.
I understand what you're saying. The only thing that I would say, and we can go through this, is if we bring it down to 175,000, in my experience, it gives you negotiation power to negotiate with Welchcomer, say it's not budgeted for 200,000, but I have 175,000 that's approved from council. That in my world, in my business world, that makes sense. And I think we should do it. So, but that's my 2 cents.
And as I would say, as a architects, engineering, consultant professional, we're not widgets. We are not a widget. We provide professional services and
I appreciate you.
Can I tell you how much money I have and as a lawyer, you'd reduce your rates?
Yeah, I've had attorneys do that. Everything's negotiable. That's my world. Everything's negotiable.
You guys. All right, so what do we want to, Mr. Sander?
Well, back to the leakage, looking at our water use efficiency report for 23, with this was just filed this year, is 41 million gallons plus
Yeah.
that we lost. Somewhere along, we pumped and we didn't sell, or we didn't authorize. I mean, we authorized other stuff that's not
Right.
sold, but that we know we're using. That's a lot. The other thing is, you know, the it's not, you know, as the mayor mentioned, it's a whole bunch of smaller contracts that we will end up doing in the future. All of them aren't gonna get done in '24 or in '25. So while we have that budget number out there, it's not gonna be all spent next year, no matter what we do. I don't, you know, there'll be super fast track. So I think there's certainly some, I'd kind of like to see some work get done on the preliminary designs. We kind of know where they are, but do we know enough to really get a good handle on it and get started on this project, even though we could all agree we're not going to finish it all, you know, on this thing. But I don't know. I hate to just sit on it for another year without any because I'm afraid we don't know how long the federal funding is going to be
You're gonna
there.
have to zoom in on that.
That's the other thing. Right now, it's available. We get our plan updated, we get our applications in.
He can tell you how.
And we don't need to have, you know, it helps to be shovel ready.
You have
but
to
we
slide
don't
your
need-
bar down
We
at
need
the
to get
bottom.
those contracts signed, and we need to get the water system plan updated quickly and signed and get on the, be prepared so next fall we can apply for those dollars. If not before, if there's a special opening. And sometimes they are, there can be some new openings throughout the year, but normally they're come fall time, it's when you get your applications in. And we need to be, I think we need to be ready for that.
Dan, do you think we should keep that 200,000 then? I'll defer to you, you're more of an expert.
I don't know if it needs to be 200,000 or what it needs to be. We know
But we should keep it.
that that's going to be overall, the overall cost of this thing, you know, in the ballpark as best we can assume at this point in time. I'd like to see something there.
Okay.
I don't know, just to keep the ball rolling a little bit.
It is, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
All right, so now that we're here at water rates, and we've talked about this, you have in front of you about 22 pages that I have put together for you, looking at the water rates and some of the issues that we are having. So, first of all, I want to just call attention to how much water we
Whoop, what are you doing over here?
Sorry. I was trying to get some, sorry.
how much water we actually pump as a city. So we average about 221 million gallons a year pumped out of the ground. So that equates to about 678 acre feet or about 30 million cubic feet. And those are some differences there. Can you go to the next page? Keep going down. We'll come back up. Keep rolling. So can you make that just a little smaller? So just so folks can kind of understand a couple things as we go through this, we measure in gallons, but we bill in cubic feet. So 1 cubic foot is about 7.48 gallons. And just for reference, 1 acre foot is 43,560 cubic feet, or how many square feet in an acre would it take to fill an acre with water? And an acre foot is about 326,000 gallons. But when we bill as a city, when we bill people for their water, we don't bill by the cubic foot. We bill by the 100 cubic feet, or HCF. So as we see the charge rates in here, what we're charging for is 100 cubic feet or 748 gallons. And this goes to the heart of some things that we're going to talk about as we go through here. So could you roll back up, please? So stop right there. So how many people or how many units do we serve water to in Millwood? How many places? So there's 768 residential units, and units are places that we bill, that we charge operating costs to, that we charge capital fees to, et cetera. On commercial, we have premises and irrigation, which are two different rates. We charge by the size of the meter. We set those policies last year. We've got 118 total commercial premises and 2 commercial irrigations. And then for public irrigation, which is us and West Valley School District, we have 10 units or 10 places that we provide water to, for a total of 898 units in Millwood that we bill every month. So can you go back to the very first slide? We'll go through those. No, okay, keep going down. Keep going down, I'm sorry. Right there. So last month, we saw the 2025 water budget. If you could make that just a touch smaller. And what we saw was we have 2 sets of costs. We have our fixed or operating costs, and these are costs that are allocated to each one of the funds based on, from the city's total costs for each of the categories that you see there, based on the usage. And the allocation to the water fund is approximately 21% of the city's total costs for these categories: labor, personal benefits, et cetera. And so you can see that we have our fixed operating costs of about $285,630 annually. And then at the bottom, we have our variable or our consumption costs. These are the costs that change kind of depending upon how much water we're producing. So we have some supplies, we have professional services, and those professional services are not all Welch Comer. Those are also Bigfoot. So those are the electrical, so servicing for the electrical, servicing for the telemetry. That has been running between $20,000 and $30,000 a year for work when we have to have work done on the motors, on the variable frequency drives, on our telemetry, all that stuff. So our variable consumption costs on an annual basis, and these are estimated for the budget on a 5-year look back. We look back over past 5 years and we take an average. That's about $126,500. So please remember, these are not actual costs. These are our anticipated costs for 2025 based on looking back over our categories for the variable and looking at what we have for the fixed costs. So our total budget for 2025 for the water fund is $112,000 roughly. If you go to the next slide, or the next page, I will say. This is a, you'll have to forgive me. I tried to turn these into PowerPoints, but taking Excel sheets and turning them into PowerPoints is
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So this is our current water rate schedule. And we have our operating and our capital improvement costs for our residential, for our commercial. And we've all seen these before. We've gone through these. But just to point out a couple things. If you look at our tiers, we have tiers of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, how we bill for consumption. And we bill, our first tier is 0 to 1,600 cubic feet. 1,600 cubic feet is roughly 12,000 gallons. And so for 12,000 gallons, if you take 1,600 cubic feet and divide that by 100 to get our 100 cubic foot, which is what we bill in, which is 32 cents, 1,600 cubic feet will cost someone $5.12 for 1,600 cubic feet of water, or 12,000 gallons. If you go to Walmart and buy a gallon of water, that's $1.39. If you were to buy that water at Walmart, that's $16,635. So The same is for the base rate for the operating. We charge our operating by the size of the meter. And then we add the capital improvements to that. And then if you keep sliding down, we charge for the same level for consumption. Going down. We charge for irrigation. 22,000 cubic feet is our thresholds for irrigation. Keep going down. And then it's the same for our public. We charge by the meter for our operating, and we charge by consumption for actual use. So if you could go to the next page down. So we have the three types of funds. We have our fixed or operating costs, we have our variable costs, which are our consumptive costs, and then we have our capital. So our fixed costs right now are easy to evaluate because they're charged based on the number of units that we have, that 898 units. So you can look at the number of units, you can charge the base rate, and you can see how much we get on a monthly basis. So we have 768 units for residential. We charge $24.65. We get roughly $19,000. Do the math on the commercial for the irrigation, for the premises, for the public, and basically every month for our fixed costs, we take in $22,980 or roughly $23,000. Our 2025 budget for our fixed is $23,800. So our shortfall for our fixed is $800. So we do.
So that's in base rate.
Per month.
Yes,
For
per
base
month.
per month. This is per
Yeah.
month. So this shows that one, somehow our base rates don't keep up with what it costs in the fixed. And over the year, we will continue to be in debt and become more indebted because we're not taking in a balanced amount on our fixed. So next page, please. So when we look at winter consumption, so one of the things that we need to, so that's the fixed. We know we have to do something with our fixed base rate to get that in line. And that's just the cost of going up. So we've got to start thinking about our variable costs. How do we charge for our variable costs? We charge by the 100 cubic foot. So the best way to figure out what we are actually using in the city for water on a base, what is it that people use just to use water? You're running your house, you're running your business, what is that? Not any of the summertime fun activities, washing cars, watching dogs, fill the swimming pool, running the sprinklers, all that sort of stuff. So we begin by looking back at our total winter consumption because we want to find what is the month where we use the least amount of water in the city. And by looking at those consumptions in cubic feet for those months, our lowest month appears to be February. We use on average about 502,000 cubic feet. So then we have to look at, because we have tier classes of residential and commercial, I didn't get into irrigation because irrigation is only for about 4 or 5 months a year and it's just too much effort to really dig into that. So for residential, our average of our lowest month is in February, and that's about 59,000. And for commercial, our average is about 141. But if you notice in 2022, our commercial really jumped. We were at 137 And in February of, which actually is 2023, and in November of 2023, in 2021, we were at, which would be 2022, because it's November 2022, December 2022, January 2023, February 2023. February 2022, sorry, I keep moving, I'm sorry. Anyway, there's a jump between 21 and 22. And I wanted to figure out what happened there, because there's a huge difference in the average if you're looking at 2019 through 2022 or 2021, and then you go 2022 and 2023. So can you go down to the next page? We broke down who was the highest commercial users. And what we found was Inland Empire Paper in 2019, 2020, and 2021 was using, on average, in their lowest period, about 34,000 cubic feet a month for the lowest month. In 22 and 23, they jumped to 82,000 cubic feet in the lowest month. And then if you look at all the rest of the commercial, that is, with the exception of those months and this, if everybody remembers, in 21, that's when we had to flush the water tank. So that December is very anomalous, so we don't really count that. But if you look, we're about 85,000 cubic feet on average for all the other commercial. IEP has, we're gonna kind of have to dig into that, because that's interesting that they have significantly increased their water consumption at the mill beginning in November of 2022. But it's important to note from how we charge our water, because if you notice, this is all other commercial use. So if you go to the next slide, please, if you go to the next page, I keep calling them slides. We can break it down by consumption per unit. So this is taking those original gross totals and then just dividing it by the number of units that we actually have. So what you find is that basically in February, the lowest month, on average, our residential users use each residential unit uses about 471 cubic feet of water in February. So that would be what you would call your base. That's basically what everybody's using water for. Now, it would be a little more if you extract it out for a month, because February is a short month, 2 less days, 3 less days, blah, blah, blah. But then you look at IEP. IEP is just one unit. They're using 82,000 cubic feet from 2022, 2023. And they appear to be on track for 2024. We only have 10 months of data, but we've been looking at it. If you look at the other commercial, the lowest month is in February. If you take the average of all that, but the lowest month's in February, the average of February is 754. So our 112 commercial users, other commercial users other than IEP, use 754 on average cubic feet at their lowest point. IEP uses at their lowest point right now currently 82,000 cubic feet. And the difference between the residential and the commercial use, if you take it all together, a residential and commercial user is about 38%. A commercial user uses about 39% more water than a residential user. And that's important for the next part of this. So if you roll down.
Kevin, I have
Yeah, go ahead.
quick question. So IEP doesn't have their own well, it's
They-
all supplied.
No, they do their own well too.
As
So
far
that's
as we
in
know.
addition to,
Yes.
So,
But it, the use of the water, is not the issue. It's how we charge on our tiers.
but that's actually, so they have a separate water system, but this is actually what we're supplying to IEP.
Yes, sir.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I kind of wanted to get in and get some ideas on what are some ways that we could potentially adjust our fixed rates to accommodate the shortfalls. And so if we look at it for the fixed rates, which this slide is out of order and I don't know how it got out of order, so my apologies. Let's see, so can you go down? No, go back up, it's fine. One more, go up. So if we look at the fixed rates, to take care of that consistent shortfall back in this fixed rates, which would be that page where it was showing that we were at $821 a month shortfall. If we take a 7% increase on our current monthly rate from $24.65 for just our base $24.65 to a new rate of $26.50, that's an increase of $1.85. That's kind of in line what we've been taking the last few years. We've taken $1.83, we took $1.83 before then. We've had some inflationary issues. So the $1.85 is consistent with what we've taken in the past. And then by looking at the meters, our meter charges are kind of wonky. We don't charge consistently. So a proposed method of charging for the meters is to take the new residential base rate of $26.50 and then add 40 cents, which is basically roughly that 40%, taking that 39% that was different in there and charging the commercial user because they use a little more, charging them a little more on their fixed. So that would make their new rate for a 1-inch meter $29.60, which would be a monthly increase of $2.25. It's a 1.5-inch meter, so you multiply this by 1.5 times. That goes to 40 from 39, that's an 87. If you do that on the 2-inch meter, it's actually a decrease. If you do that on the 3-inch meter, it's a decrease, and if you do that on the 4-inch meter, it's a decrease. We don't have a lot of 3-inch and 4-inch meters, but it provides stability to how we're actually, and a method to how we're actually charging our offset, our increases in what we're charging on our fixed costs. And then we do the same thing, or I propose, city proposes, this is me running through all this. We propose the irrigation to do the same thing, make the same changes. So if you go down to the next one, the new rates on a monthly basis would yield, and you go through all the way down the bottom, you go look down at the bottom, would yield $24,625, or a total of $295,287. Our fixed budget is $285,630. So that would generate an additional approximately $10,000 in income by adjusting these rates and bringing them in line with this methodology. This is the proposal. This is why I want to get this out of here today, so there's lots of time for people to think about this and look it over before we come back, because at the end of the day, whatever we settle on for however we adjust the rates, this isn't carved in stone. This isn't, hey, this is the best way to do it. This is the opening for you folks to look at it, and if you have it or if other individuals have a comment on it. But as Debbie said, we need to be making a profit because that builds reserves for things. And this would begin to give us a little bit of reserve in there on an annual basis, and it would stop us from continuing to lose money. So this is for the fixed costs. This is for our fixed costs for our operating. Let's roll the next one.
And just to be clear, Kevin, that represents 3.2%.
Overall increase.
Not increase, just excess.
Yes.
It's 3.2%. Seems quite reasonable.
So
Yes.
we did all the analysis on consumption for our lowest points. And based on that analysis of consumption, I'm going to take the first stab out there and say, we are, as a city, very generous to our detriment as a going concern from the way our budget looks with how much water we supply before we go to the next tier. And so our 1,600, our current tiers are tier 1, 0 to 1,600 cubic feet, tier 2, 1,600 to 4,000, and tier 3, everything greater than 4,000. And so it goes 32, 40, 48. My proposal is we have our tier 1 set for what are a little in excess of what our lowest winter base is, which is that approximately 500. We set our lowest tier for 600. That's the lowest average number for what a residential unit uses for water on a just, I don't want to say getting by, but on a daily, to accomplish daily needs. Then we set our next tier from 600 to 1,800 cubic feet. Our next tier from 1,800 to 3,600 cubic feet. And our last tier is greater than 3,600 cubic feet. So we drop down. And what that does is it gives people the opportunity, because not everybody uses 32 to 40 to 48. We increase the lowest tier by 3 cents, but then we have 2 tiers in there where the intervals jump quicker, but there's more control, because what you'll see is that in the summer, as we go forward, we're still not residences aren't using a phenomenal amount of water. That's kind of it. That's what we give in there is a phenomenal amount of water. And then the same thing at the commercial, our tiers are greater than 4,000. We go quicker through the tiers at the lower end because all of our businesses use a lot less water than 4,000 cubic feet. So really what we're doing is we're sandwiching up the tiers and we're generating another tier in the middle to kind of capture some additional revenue or let folks, if they're not using as much water, not paying as much. So there is some benefit because we are actually leaving, in this realm, we could be leaving water on the table or money on the table or not charging as much because there's a difference between the 40 and the 38 cents. So if you keep rolling down, it takes care of public irrigation. So what's our maximum usage? What's the most water that folks are using? So this is our summer month, and basically, rather than present all the summer months, this is just looking at our summer months and taking the highest month from each one of those and putting it in there. So our residential maximum summer consumption averages about 3.8 million cubic feet. Or our highest average consumption per unit is about 5,000 cubic feet in the summer. That's the highest amount you get to. If you look at the summer months for IEP, the highest amount in the summer they typically use is about 89,000 cubic feet. All other commercial users use about 3,500 cubic feet. And then for our irrigation, our public irrigation uses about 108,000 cubic feet, and our commercial irrigation uses about 60,000 cubic feet. So that's what it breaks down to on our monthly average consumption for our highest. So if you go to the next slide, you'll have to scroll this down. This is a rough attempt to estimate how much revenue is generated by using this rate structure. And really all it is it is a linear approximation of the rise and fall in consumption. It's just a linear, it's not anything like that. So the whole side on the other side there is just basically taking the amount that was the minimum. We convert it to dollars because we're really looking at dollars. But in the winter, most of our residents only use about 500 cubic feet. In the maximum, we have to break it down by tiers. They use about 4,082. So you have your first 600, your next 1,200, your next 1,800, and then your final 1,300 cubic feet. So if you take all that and you run that out, that is the total for all 768 residential users. If they use 500 cubic feet at the minimum, that generates the city $1,344. In the summer, if the average consumption of the 768s is 498.82, and that means the average. That means some people are using a lot less. Some people are using a lot more than 5,000 cubic feet for their highest month. You break that down by tier, and the income for that 1 month, the maximum month to the city, is about $16,000. So you set your max point and your min point, you run the average up, you run the average down, and all you're doing is just taking what you would anticipate average revenue generated. We're not talking about consumption. These numbers do not represent consumption. They represent dollars generated by the consumption. And that generates over the year $104,000 for the commercial or for the residential. If you run it out, it generates $11,500 from the commercial, but there's a huge difference in the number of units. We've got 117 versus 168. IEP, if you generate that over the year, they as one user generate about $5,000 in revenue. And then you look at the two irrigations, and the two irrigations run a very short distance. They run about overall about 5 months. There's some level of irrigation workings. So we take that over a much shorter distance, run those generated up and down. And you can see that the public irrigation generates about 12,000 and the commercial irrigation generates about 1,200. So if you roll that up just a little bit, so our estimated, and this is estimated, annual variable cost income based on this model is about $133,576. Our budget is $126,500, so this would generate an excess of $7,076 annually. But this is a total estimation because it all depends on what's the weather out. Do people want to water a lot? Do people want to do other things? You know, it just depends on so much. What I would say for this is the fact that this is positive shows that we're kind of on the right track for this because it's certainly not negative on our budget and it's generating annually, according to the model, about $7,000 annually, but the real world usage can be way different. And this all changes if Avista raises the power, if power rates, if we have something that we have to pay for out of the variable fund, if people decide they're not gonna water their lawns, if, you know, you name it. We have a very wet year and nobody has to water, something like that. So this, getting to the heart of this is, and this is to take home and study and really chew on, the current model that we have for charging our water by consumption, I will say it, this is my opinion, it's not fair to the city. We are giving away that commodity. Now, we have to be realistic about how we charge for it. So we have to be realistic about how we set the tiers. But that initial tier, that 1,600, that's really high. That's a lot. That's a lot of water to be putting out there. Particularly when you're looking and you're saying the you know, we max out for most of our users max out at somewhere between 5,000 at our highest point, 5,000 or 3,500 cubic feet. And I will say, from looking at the residential consumptions, we have a few residential users in the city that kind of skew that high. It probably is lower than that. It probably is because there are a few folks in here that their lawns must squish in the middle of summer when you walk across them. I just cannot.
You're looking right at me.
I'm not looking at you, brother, but all I can say
It's my
is
wife, it's not me.
that is a phenomenal amount of water. So this is the best way I can come up with trying to get a handle on what our variable cost income would be if we went with this type of tier model system. Dan, if you see something different in this, I don't want, I'm happy to supply everything I did, but it's the best case of what I could try and figure out to give council some rough idea of what we would generate by moving the rates around. Yes, Sean, what's up?
Yeah, so this is a great analysis. Thank you very much. I was wondering, is there any way we can get proportionality? So you have your 3 tiers, and I'd love to see the percentage of people that fall in each of those 3 tiers, and then what percentage of people will fall, or households, not people, but households will fall under the 4 tiers, because that will be very determinant. Like if, for instance, let's say 80% of the people are in that first tier, but if we create a first tier and a second tier cutoff on that second one, and 0% of people are in the first tier, we're arguably then just creating still a 3-tier system. It's just that we've raised it. And then also if we found out there were a bunch of people in the top tier, that is very telling, because I could see behaviorally if my water bill just went really far up and I really did not have any disposable income or any way of mitigating that, I could see lowering usage. And so to what you said, this is a model that we anticipate will be profitable, but it may not be profitable. Where I think on the top tier, you know, people who are using that much water or have that kind of discretionary funding probably aren't going to be necessarily swayed. So I would just love to see the proportionalities of the tiers.
I'll look at you Is that something you can do?
Sure.
Okay, we can
I
work
can
on
do
that
that.
because she can go through it, back through the data and kind of get an idea of what our consumptions are. I think for the most part, I think we could just keep it to residential and other commercial, to be honest, because what's interesting is IEP's rate seems to be very consistent.
Thank you. And then also, and not to burden staff time, if you ever feel comfortable sharing raw data with me, I'm very capable of analyzing my own data. So if you guys, were like, wow, she's asking a lot of very specific questions, you can send me raw data. I can do it myself.
If you want the raw, you can just ask.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd prefer the proportionality, but I'm just saying if there was a concern of like, oh, this is too much staff time, I'm also very amenable to doing it myself.
All right, so next page, please. So that's the variable cost. So then we have capital, and basically the capital, we charge everybody $5 for capital. And that was not generating capital. So what we looked at, and I discussed this with Debbie, is taking a $1 increase in the capital improvement fee from just in general, and then for each one of the meters, adding, if you have a 1.5 inch meter, it's $1.50. If you got 2, it's $2 over that initial base. 3, you can see from there. So if you go down to the next slide, so that generates this is the income that we would make off of that, or we would receive off of that. Total monthly is $5,400. Total annual is $65,000. Our 2024 intake was $54,000. So we end up with $11,000 more to the good. $11,000. Looking at some of the projects we're doing is not a lot, but it is moving toward the positive. But it's also not taking that huge bite, just going, well, we need to get to, everybody pays $10 or something like that. It's just trying to be effectual in this. So, next one.
Kevin, I have a question. So
Yeah.
that 11,000, that would also go towards the fixed 3.2 and the variable 5%. So any excess then goes into the capital fund? Correct.
It could, yes.
Right. Is there a standard for cities that you try to hit for percentages for capital reserves? Like 5%. So commercial, it's 10%, right? And so if you have a commercial building, you take your gross income, set aside 10%. Is there a standard like that for cities?
No,
Okay.
it's what the council chooses.
But we do have requirements from the D.
Yes, we do have requirements from our lender.
So from our lender source, we have to have,
Well, that goes to our beginning balances. So we
Right,
have
but-
to have 12.5% of operating, we have to have,
so we do have some constraints, and we do have reserves that are set aside, but those are encumbered reserves. We have to keep those reserves.
we can't spend them.
I see. But to your question, I can look in the AWWA manual for the water rates manual and see if there's something in there for capital, some type of capital reserve. Don't think there is?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
It's not, I don't want to say it's not common, but it's, we're doing a much better job, I think, of going through all the cost of delivering a service. And having those who use more of that service than others to pay. Oftentimes, it just even having the fixed rate is a major step. Well, I remember there's one little city that, their rates were so low, they couldn't pay the electrical bill in the summertime.
Yeah,
They didn't bring enough money in. That city wasn't too far away.
we've had spending freezes. Yeah, we've had spending freezes where
So,
we can't spend any more money. So,
3.2% reserve for it fixed seems crazy low to me, so.
What is the auditor gonna say, Debbie, when we get to that? They just wanna see us building reserves?
well, yeah, you can't go down.
Yeah.
Your fund balance can't go down like that. It just means you haven't set your rate right.
The auditors aren't gonna set a standard for you, but I can tell you that historically, having capital reserves was not common. I think there was a very strong preference by most cities, utility providers to set the lowest rate possible, to break even. And then as the funding sources started to dry up, and the need for agencies to bring their own dollars to programs, the matches, I'd say over any of the clients I work with, water utilities, sewer utilities, both in Washington and Idaho, capital reserve is setting rates to establish reserves, whether they call it a capitalization fund, depreciation fund, some call it a plant improvement fund or plant investment fund. Become very common. I've got some water districts, not in this state, and others in Idaho, that have a, they just have a flat dollar amount that they want to maintain a set, and it's a 6-digit dollar amount as their capital reserves. Just because they need it for the match or as interest rates climb for financing, whatever it might be. We're probably a little behind the curve, actually, in getting those capital reserves established. We're behind it.
Major piece of equipment's not cheap if we lose a well unexpectedly. Oh. It's one thing to have it planned, but.
If you lost a well, if you lost a shaft, if you lost a line shaft that destroyed the well, that's easily $750,000. Cause you're gonna have to drill a whole new, if you even can afford drilling a whole new well, whole new shaft, typically wrecks the turbine.
As we sit now, if that happened, we can't fix it.
Brian, do other jurisdictions based it on a percentage?
It's all over the map, Kelly, it really is, because it's really, whereas in the commercial world, you're often answering to your banks who kind of maintain similar standards based on credit rating and everything else. You're not answering to an external source like that, you're establishing your own policy. And so the policy established by the electeds is what really kind of drives it. Yeah.
I remember discussing this back when we were doing the improvements to the stand tower.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, that will happen. Well, it's here.
And here's the other thing. As the city treasurer, I am bound. And if you don't establish higher rates, then I have to report your utility fund as a going concern. I'm obligated to. It's not, it's part of the RCWs. So we're getting there. At the end of next year, we would be there. If you don't do something, I will have to report because you're going backwards.
Dan, you have a comment.
and for, a number of utilities, the new construction, the privilege to hook up to your existing facilities, it can be in the tens of thousands of dollars just to get the
Absolutely.
hook, just to be able to buy yourself into the thing.
And that's where a fair portion of the
And that's,
capital funding comes from, is the new
yeah,
connections.
and we
Those-
just don't
You don't have it.
have those.
Yep.
I mean, we have some, but we're not going to get $1 million out of
Yep.
new construction,
No.
new services in the next 10 years.
You're only gonna get what's in your fee schedule now.
Yeah, in theory, that's, you can charge, I don't want to call it a premium, but it's essentially a premium to a new customer because that's essentially their buy-in to the existing infrastructure. If you had an area for development to do that, you could do it.
And one of the things they're moving into is this whole asset management. How much does it cost? How long is your pieces of equipment going to last?
Yeah.
And to figure that out, and how much it cost, and the smallest system's $1 million, you know, no, the smallest.
Yeah.
And for us, I don't know what our asset management, number would be total. But that's, that's another step for us to get into.
We are a small system and we have limited opportunity for growth. I think the biggest thing what it is to look at the units. The units change, the number of units that we have, residential, commercial, they bounce around a little bit, but they don't go like this. They
No.
just do this. We are not growing our system. We're just not growing the system. It is what it is. So sometimes we had 100, sometimes we have 167 residential units. Sometimes, one time we had 169 residential units. It's just how unit comes in. Yeah, but it just does this. So for your consideration in this packet is what I have put together for a proposed schedule on these next 2 pages, proposed rate schedule. This is, you consider this the opening point of discussion, comments, if you keep rolling down. I tried to do it and now keep going. That's just the rest of the year rate schedule. So I did try and look at what rate changes would be in increasing unit. So a base rate based on this schedule, we would have an additional $1.85 in the operating, additional $1 in the capital improvement for residential in just the base rate. So that would be an additional $2.85 a month, or $34.20 over the year. If you look down through the consumption, it depends on how much is used and how much isn't used. For the tiers that are in there, there's some decreases, but then once you get over that 3,600 cubic feet, that's when the increase starts going, because it's $3.36 plus 48 cents for every 100 cubic feet over that 3,600 there. Same thing with the commercial, the non-residential, some things go up, some things go down. You see some decreases on the 3-inch and 4-inch meters. I think we have like 1 4-inch meter. But we're also charging a significantly higher on the capital, so that the total amount kind of doesn't really stay the same, but it does stay the same. You roll down, it's the rest of the consumption for the commercial, and then the public irrigation, the charges for the meters, or the charges for the base rate based on meter size, and then the consumption, and then go down to the next sheet. And so this is based on that new schedule, the new rate schedule. The increase to the fixed cost income from the difference between 2024 and 2025 is that $9,600. The estimated increase to the variable cost income is about $7,000, and then the increase to the capital improvement fund is $11,000, for a total fund increase of $28,000, I guess annually, depending, but that would put an additional $28,000 in the fund on an annual basis. But if we think of it in terms of some of the capital projects we have to have come up and try and build a capital reserve, $27,000 is kind of like a starting point, I guess. So I agree with Shauna that looking at the distribution within the tiers is a good idea. I just did not have the time and did not want to get into it. But like I said, this is simply a starting point. So, Debbie and Daniel can manipulate that data far quicker than I can, because they can get it right out of Master Read and Master Meter Master. But we can see that our current rate schedule is not delivering the income that we need to not only keep this at at break even, but we are continuing to lose money, and as you can hear our treasurer constantly iterate, we have the threat of being labeled a going concern. So we do have to look and see as to how we build how we start to build dollars. What I would say is that this discussion here was also the intent of this discussion was to try and provide some information for the question that was asked in a roundabout way at the last meeting regarding how much money would we get if we wholesaled water? Because if you begin to look at the base consumption, that base unit consumption of 5,000 CFS or 9,000 for residential or 9,000 CFS, 500 cubic feet per unit for residents or 900 cubic feet per commercial, that would be a good starting point to say this is the unit by which we determine our fixed cost by, and we are going to charge some or none. If somebody wants, let's just say, some set of cubic feet, 10,000, they want to buy 100,000 cubic feet from us. That's not anything, but we can use that. You could take that 500 cubic feet and say, well, this equates to this many residences. We want to charge you this much for our fixed, because that basically is like us adding this many residences. It's basically getting back to what Brian was saying or what Dan was saying about the facility charge, the capitalization of the facility charge. But without that number, we can't have that discussion of what we use as a base consumption to set how we keep our system running. Because the amount of water that we would sell is what determines for us how many units that equates to in our system. Obviously, all that would be negotiated or whatever, but it at least provides us a way to say, okay, we know if we were to enter into contract with discussions to broker water to someone, to wholesale water, how much do they want? How many units is this? How much consumption is this? And make a blended rate that would supply money to both our fixed income, our capital fund, and our variable consumption based on some real world data and some objective numbers that we have in our system. So.
And all that, that's not discussion at this point in time at all, but it'd been also whatever that contract may look like. We don't want to be used just for peak flow. We'd like to have a pretty high minimum.
Oh no, you would. We're not. Yeah, there would be
a steady use of water.
Yes, it would be definitely something that would say by contract, you're taking this much water.
Yes.
We don't.
But we want that pretty level.
Yes.
Not 100
No.
So but that's way down the road.
That's down the road, but yes.
But that's but you're exactly what you're doing. You're coming up. We're having a basis to start with.
Shauna.
Thank you. So I remember last time we increased the rate, we had done it to correct some of the we were actually talking about how the old rate, the lowest users were subsidizing the highest utilizers. And when I look at the new proposed rates on page 20 of 2022 and 21 of 2020, page 2022, it feels like there is still a negative variance, like the proposed would decrease the net cost for highest utilizers while increasing the net cost for our lowest utilizers. So it feels like we're going backwards from our articulated
Can you go down to
movement that we.
Can you go down to that rate change real quick? She's talking about, no, down. Yeah, keep going. Keep going.
Keep going.
Keep it going. Keep coming. Okay, right there, stop. Okay, so you can see that in those middle tiers, those are actually decreases of rate. So we are actually going down in what we're charging the middle tiers. It's a decrease of 24 cents. It's a decrease per unit of $1.06 based on 100 cubic foot, because we find that most of our users aren't using, they're not using more than 3,600. So we're actually doing that down, and we are actually charging, or under this, it's my belief that we are charging this, but we can't know that, as you pointed out, Shauna, until we actually look at what the consumption is based on, or what the charges would be based on who is consuming what when during the months. Right. So I agree that we need to have a deeper data dive on these. And see if these are either the right tiers, or the right tier thresholds, or the right rates for those tiers.
Thank you. And I agree with you. We absolutely need that proportional breakdown. But also, I was saying we made a articulated movement, a policy level movement to, hey, the lowest utilizers are subsidizing the highest utilizers. Mm-hmm. Well, even though we don't have the proportion, we now know the higher tiers are actually going to have a negative variance, so they will actually be paying less than their baseline is, unless their utilization goes up. And then the lowest utilizers are going to be paying more. So that is actually counter to our big policy discussion that we had last time we altered the rates. So we are reinstituting lowest utilizers subsidizing the highest utilizers. So to me, it would feel like either all tiers should have an increase. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think what this is that we're changing the rates, but we're also changing the tiers. We're ratcheting the tiers down. So I think because our first tier was 1,600. We charged 32 cents for the first 1,600 cubic feet. Now we're charging 35 cents for the first 600, and then 38 for the next 1,200, which would be to the 1,800, because we're trying to, the way I'm looking at it is that we need to have tighter tiers as well as slightly higher rates. But I agree with you, we don't have enough data, and that's why, to be honest, it's not a policy decision because we haven't passed it. This is there's no place to start unless we start. and this is
No, I understand. I'm just calling back to the fact we actually had a robust discussion around our rate changes last time, in that, we're going to be disproportionately increasing the top ends of the tiers because in our historical past, we have subsidized the top tiers. So I understand what you say, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. We won't know until we actually get the proportionality breakdown, and we can just say, look, right now I'm just talking about a directional thing, but I am a little concerned that the top end all has negative variances and the low end. And even though I understand you created new categories that are, splitting apart the lower categories, but we definitely see a directional trend here of the top will be reduced rates and the bottom will have increased rates.
Well, I think the reason you're saying that is we have to increase the charges in the tiers. So that's why we've added another. So, and then what we did when we came up with this new structure is we tried to set a base rate that would sustain us, but, you know, we have to consistently raise it. And then we wanted to, you know, grandma and grandpa, they're not using even 600 cubic feet. So I certainly, you know, don't want to see that greatly increased. So I think I understand what you're saying. I think we're on the right track. I think we can stay with what we originally intended. We just don't know where our breaking point is yet in the consumption. We know we have to do the $1.85 in the base rate, or we're not even collecting enough base rate, you know? So.
Actually, we don't know that until we have proportional breakdown, because we don't know how it's distributed. I mean, we
No,
could
no,
be
no, 'cause
actually.
The
The base rate is the base rate for everybody. We're talking base rate and tiers. So the base
Okay.
rate, we know we have to raise no matter what. And the capital, we know
Understood.
we have to do something with. In our old plan that we're going off of, we should be at $6 instead of $5. But I'm telling you that study didn't work the first year, because unfortunately, inflation went like this, and, you know. So I understand what you're saying, and I certainly wouldn't want, you know, higher users subsidizing, or lower users subsidizing upper, but I don't think, really, we don't know that yet. So, yeah.
There.
I think the
2018.
the item is that on the overages, you know, you just use the size of meter, you know, $2.
Yeah.
And,
I know.
and the core difference between the demand, you know, that the 2 and a 3-inch meter goes is more than 3, you know, or 2.
Yeah.
You know, so I think of all your work you've done, that's one little area I would pick on, and I will do a little bit of more homework to see what that would bring out if we took that the starting spot for those 2, 3, and 4-inch meters and boosted that up a little bit more.
As I said,
So I appreciate all the details, you know, because it gives us something to work from.
as I said, this is a starting point to try and fix something that we know needs to be fixed. And the level of detail here may be overkill, but at least it provides us a way to actually look into the numbers that we have and try and use the data that we have to try and make the fairest system to everybody, but still generate the income that we need to run the system and run it in a way that it stays as that it is not a going concern. So I'm just,
And your work shows us it's possible without doubling everything.
Yeah,
You know, so
exactly, yes.
it's a baby step, but it's a step and we could do. So I think, you know, back to the
Task at hand.
the hearing tonight. You know,
Yes.
we have a lot more confidence. I have a lot more confidence that, you know, yes, we can set the budget, we can go for it. We know we know there's some options, pretty, it's never easy to raise rates, but pretty, you know, we all know, I mean, just look at my insurance, my, you know, homeowners insurance, you know, oh my God, you know, so.
Yeah, there's a lot feeding that.
You know, we've got to.
In the last 3 years, our liability insurance has almost doubled.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
So-
good.
so I would just say that if council has comments or suggestions, Ms. Matkin has the spreadsheet and has all the information and all the data and everything like that. Just please, I have turned all this over to her and she can answer and has the data at her fingertips to to back that up or answer questions on that. So this is important because basically at the next meeting, you'll have to talk and decide kind of what we want to do about water. But since we are still here on the budget,
Yes.
the question would be, we've had some discussion, do you wish at this time to consider amending the water portion of the budget to remove, at this point, the cast iron replacement design study with always can be amended, because we saw that that money was technically in there. It's not good, but at least gives us some idea of what we want, or what is your, be thinking about that with what is your pleasure for the budget, and then what I'd like to do is wrap this up and then open the public hearing.
So Debbie,
Yes.
what are the restrictions on the REIT fund? We can't use that as part of the water infrastructure? Because it's restricted to general facilities?
Well, not necessarily, but you have to have, sorry, I can't do two things at once.
Right, if they take it out.
If you, so, and I'm gonna maybe refer to Brian, but, yeah.
What are the restrictions on the REIT funds? We can't use that for part of the water infrastructure.
You can.
You can kick the statute up.
Yeah, it's iffy.
Yeah, like you said, we've been building those funds for years.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Okay.
That's why Mr.
So,
Wurst is here.
REIT one is less restrictive, but it still has to be, it can be used for Argonne infrastructure.
Yeah, it can be used because it's not an enterprise fund.
Yeah, I don't know, because it's that's the gray area.
For speed humps.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like,
no, it has to be in your capital facilities plan, so
Both
speed
of
bumps
them?
aren't in there.
Both of them?
What?
I thought.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The second one is more restrictive.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's for special capital.
I was just
Yeah.
wondering if we could
Might have
some
alternative funds.
One, we might be able to, but I don't know. I will defer to Brian.
After tonight's meeting or presentation, I'm comfortable keeping that 200,000. The only thing that I would caution council, I think that 3.2% capital reserves for your fixed cost, that's not keeping up well. I guess now it could keep up with inflation. That's low, in my opinion. So I think this is a good starting point. I'd like to see 5%. And I'm used to percentages, but that seems low.
It is low.
Yeah, and so, but I'm comfortable with the 200,000 staying.
I would leave it because like Dan said, we need to have that ready to go if we go after state funding next year.
Yeah.
Right, and we should. I think water is important, right? And 18% loss,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
I don't
So-
think that's responsible.
Here's your next caveat. I don't know what you're intending to do tonight, but you have to adopt the budget before December 6th, and our meeting isn't until after that December. So you either have to elect to do it tonight, or we are having another special meeting. And I don't know that we'll have any more data
Seems like
for
you-
you.
So here's what I would say. Let's open the public hearing,
Okay.
see if there's anyone providing testimony, and then we can have a motion on the budget as presented, and then if folks wish to defer, that would require a special meeting, or if folks wish to amend, we can choose that amendment at that time and amend the ordinance, et cetera.
I think the definition of REIT,
Yeah, what is the definition of REIT?
All right, REIT one, capital projects. Those projects, local government for planning, acquisition, construction, reconstruction, repair, I won't go through all that. Improvements of streets, roads, highways, sidewalks, street and road lighting systems, traffic signals, bridges, domestic water systems, storm and sanitary sewer systems, parks, recreational, but they also have to be, if I'm correct, they also have to be identified in your capital facilities plan of your
Yeah, they
comp
do.
plan. REIT two is, sorry, I'm looking at the statute. REIT two is a little bit more restrictive in the sense that it's still the planning acquisition, but it's for streets, roads, highways, sidewalks, street and road lighting systems, water systems, storm and sanitary sewer systems, planning, construction of those projects. And then I've got to see, I think REIT two has to be identified in another specific area. of your-
does.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it is.
There's also certain uses that you may use for maintenance, but it's a pretty restrictive definition, so.
Very good.
So, it might be when you have a project brought forward to you, the council may just want to identify if a portion of that project qualifies, or
Yeah.
if the project qualifies for use of REIT funds, and you may want to start thinking about tapping into those.
And how do we know that? Is that a?
Well, I think that'd be I should just be a natural point of discussion, right? If a project comes up, that should be,
Yeah.
if you want to know that in advance that it might be, REIT one or REIT two might be available, we'll just, staff will be ready to address that with you.
And is that your call, or is that the auditor's call, or is that?
Somebody's gonna
if
have
we
to
think
make
it
a,
is.
somebody's gonna have to make an opinion that it fits within the
Yeah,
statute.
within the statute,
So
But,
that
yeah,
opinion is, yes, it should be eligible.
Yeah, there's a general understanding of what projects fall within it. I mean, REIT's been around for a number of years now, so,
Yeah.
but
I can't pull it off the top of my head, but I can look it up.
Good. That's another excellent idea.
But yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to mention it tonight, because,
That's a
I
lot of
mean, I
money.
don't care if you use it or not, but you could.
So at this time, with no further presentation and no further questions to staff, I will at 7:38 open the public hearing regarding ordinance 546, the 2025 budget. Do we have anybody signed up?
It wasn't specific, it was just remarks.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so if there is anybody who wishes to provide testimony on ordinance 546, please raise your hand. Second call on ordinance 546. Third and final call on ordinance 546. Yes, please.
Hi, Shereen Young at 8903 East Liberty, and I'm not entirely certain, so I see 546 here, so it does include the capital. And it shows what is in, like you were just discussing, the REIT 1 and 2. And then it also shows the utility fund, so that's the ones we were just talking about, right? The water. Okay, so as far as comments, I do thank you for asking about the proportionality. I think that's really important. But one thing that Dan had mentioned is about when you have new entities or new units trying to be built, we as a city, aren't we required to build like 49? Isn't that our allocation from the county, that we need to have 49 more affordable housing units built within Millwood?
So that depends on what our land use is. So we have a conflict in the standpoint that and Amanda will talk about this at the next meeting,
Okay.
that we are gonna have to, based on whatever model comes out, because there's what's in the HAP template, and then there's what just is coming down. There's a different model that is allocating the actual housing units that Commerce has just rolled out, and they're still working through that model. long story short is Amanda will be briefing at the December meeting because it'll be a joint meeting of the planning commission and the council, briefing us as to what our allocation is technically looking like. Some of that allocation we can't meet. Some of it with like the emergency housing, we don't have in Millwood the facilities to actually build that emergency housing because that's more like somebody with hotels or something like that. The permanent supportive housing, that also has some issues too, because that's also something that we may not have that capacity because we don't quite have that zoning. For some of the other units, I think she's gonna tell us that we have to look at potentially changing zoning. Because our zoning may be too restrictive for the type of housing that we are being told that we are supposed to be allotting for within the city for that. So I can't tell you that, yes, we have to have 49 units, and you also have to remember that that 49 units is over a 20-year horizon. Yeah, so a 20-year horizon on that.
Okay, so I guess that would just be of consideration then as you're considering all these things about what a buy-in might be in regards to building housing. And then the other question was, I understand that there is a change going about on property tax, like the paper mill you mentioned, will be lower. And so with all of that coming, what additional savings are we able to look at within our budgets? And I understand, 2025 maybe not, but 2026, or what avenues are we going to pursue for cost savings?
So I would say, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I would just say that right now, Millwood runs a really lean ship.
Right. No, I'm not
mean,
saying it doesn't, but if, dollars and cents, dollars in is what we have for dollars out. That's all. Just saying we have to balance.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all this hard work. I know it is hard work.
Any other comments?
Todd Beasy, 8610 East South Riverway. I want to echo what Shereen said. It's important to balance the budget. And then the council members who are pursuing that also appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Any other, comments? Any other people wishing to provide testimony on ordinance 546? Third and final call for 546. Seeing no one rush forward, we will close the public hearing at, I don't trust that clock, 7:43. And so at this time, I would be looking to council for a motion on ordinance 546 as presented.
I make a motion to approve ordinance 546 as presented.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second, so discussion. Any discussion on the ordinance as presented? Ms. Vesey?
Well, because it's not, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, apologies. But it's my understanding we haven't budgeted it, or we haven't balanced it yet. So are we mandating now as a December 6th meeting for us to talk about it?
No,
Or
'cause it has to be
is this
passed by.
the one that we can't approve?
Well,
So the budget as presented balances.
no.
Provided we,
Provided we take that provided we take that rate increasement of $1.85 per base. Then we can balance, and then we can work on tiers later. Does that make sense?
It's a balancing thing.
are you asking me? So what I heard you say is we are gonna definitely be raising our base to the 185. That would be solidified today if we approve this without pulling
Or
the
you
capital,
So,
So it budgets by the ordinance, because we budget at the fund level.
But you haven't approved a rate increase by
Right.
by city code, that would have to come back to you as a resolution.
Yeah, so you can, I guess, yeah. We can pass it, because we're balancing at the fund level, but we're not balancing at the account level. That's why we have to come back and work on it. Does that make?
so what,
You would be,
Yeah.
you'd be approving a budget to satisfy the budget statute requirements. You would have
Yes.
to be presented with a resolution
Yes.
to adopt the rates, the utility rates that are premised in this budget. If you don't adopt that, I think you're gonna be facing a very,
Bad year.
very early budget amendment,
Yeah.
ordinance in.
Remember, we put the rates in January. So we haven't done the rate schedule yet,
and
the
it-
fee schedule.
And the city has done that in the past. I think in the 2018, actually, you adopted the budget and then came back with the rate resolution in December, to implement in January. So-
Right. As long as we're balanced by January, but we have to adopt the budget at the fund level by the 6th.
yeah,
So,
we are more often than not put in this situation because they want the budget to be adopted before we typically have our regular meeting. Is what, with
Yeah.
the sixth is just a hard date, right?
that's a hard date that we have
That's
to,
just
by
a hard
RCW,
date,
we
but
have
our-
to have it by then.
But we never have our first meeting before
And
the
this,
sixth.
yeah, and that's kind of why in the past, we've started earlier, but because of the audit, we couldn't jump on it earlier. So, like last year, we had all this in place and we were good. And years prior, hey, wait a minute.
so for this,
Since the last audit.
Yeah.
Yeah, since the last audit, that's when we last passed it like this and had to come back.
So, more comments, Shauna?
so for discussion for the council, it seems to
Yeah, I
me that we took this capital thing out, we would have a budgeted balance, and then we would be able to just approve this and then move into December. I agree 100% with everything that was said, including Dan saying, hey, we want to pursue funding. We want to, so I mean, I think this is a priority issue, but it feels like we're not approaching it comprehensively. We're like saying, oh, well, we're going to approve it based off of this thing, but we don't know that we are 100% going to pass this thing. And it feels a little disjointed. I mean, I would even prefer a December special meeting, not by December 6th, but a special meeting in December where we rolled up our sleeves and
So,
comprehensively looked at this.
but the problem is, this happens all the time. Every time you guys
Okay.
vote for something a contract that wasn't in the budget, that we then have to go back and amend, that's what you're doing.
So I would, for a matter of procedure, Shawna, you can offer an amendment to strike that CI from the budget. That would reduce our expenditures in the joint utility fund by $200,000.
Mm-hmm.
And would that then balance at the account level?
Yes.
So that would then balance at the account level at that point.
Debbie,
We won't be going so far backwards in the fund balance. That's the trick.
but Debbie, it wouldn't actually balance. It'd be 885 and.
Yeah, it'd be a
So it'd be
little,
close. It'd be closer.
it'd be a lot closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Do-
when you say
you-
balance,
6 to
what are you
1?
meaning? Because I think you're balancing by pulling out of your reserve funds. That's how you're balancing.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that is
you'll have
how
a-
we're balancing.
You'll have balance in the legal definitional context.
Right,
But actually what you're doing is you're pulling from,
right.
Yeah.
So currently, we're balanced.
At the fund level.
But at the fund level, right? So, but we have a plan to balance, correct?
Yes.
So I think that's the important thing
Exactly.
is we're not throwing up our hands and saying, well, we're not gonna balance.
Well,
And we don't have a plan. Here we have a clear, concise plan. I think that,
it's whatever you guys are comfortable with. Don't look at me.
yeah, I mean,
You know,
I'm comfortable with the plan.
yeah, I guess we could have another meeting,
Debbie,
but what's the
let's just
purpose
let them-
of the next meeting? Because it's gonna be the same information, and in my mind.
But it's not gonna be, the same information because we don't know exactly how we just budget, how we're balancing it is we're saying, hey, Kevin made this model and he did an amazing job with this analysis. He did an amazing job, but we actually don't know what it's going to suss out to be, even with the additional information that we need. And I guess, I'm just trying to have a conversation because what I don't want us to do is just piecemeal this and think, oh, well, we addressed that at another meeting and we keep going down the road and and the problem's only going to get worse. As Shireen pointed out, we're going to have a whole nother issue. And so part of how we got here is that we kicked things down the road because we haven't been balanced with our rates for 16 years. Is what I'm understanding from the last few meetings. I'm just trying to, all these things are super important. I just want us to really fully understand the rate change. I understand we're gonna have a rate change. I 100% support the water projects that we're talking about. I just don't want us to have them as a bunch of piecemeal conversations that then we move on because we don't have, nothing's forcing us to stop and really examine it as a comprehensive issue.
So I would say that we have before the council are two competing issues. One is we have a budget that we need to pass or not pass or or amend or have a special meeting or something else. And then two, we have water rate issues that we know we as a city have to deal with. So I would say that if coming back and trying to have a special meeting before the deadline of passing the budget on the 6th, so you would have the opportunity to have a special meeting next Tuesday. You would have the possibility to have a special meeting Tuesday the 3rd. And then that would be it. So you have two additional opportunities for special meetings the following week and the first week of December to pass the budget.
This room's used by the planning commission on the 26th.
On the 26th. So we would not be, that would be either the Monday or Wednesday, the 27th.
Or are you saying that?
I'm just saying that there's opportunities for special meetings. If the intent is to tackle the water rate issue before you pass this budget, then there needs to be sufficient time for, one, staff to assemble the information that has been asked for and perform the analysis that have been asked for. Two, for the potential that at the first time you meet to have a discussion of the water rates, you might not reach resolution. You might want more. That would be, so you would need to have a second special meeting because you have a hard deadline of the 6th to pass a budget. So I don't know if staff has enough time to get the work done by next week in order to have the first special meeting next week so that you could have a special meeting the week before the week of the 2nd, so you could make it before the 6th. So that's more the logistics side of things. In if the intent is to address the water rates concretely prior to passing the budget. The alternative is to remove the CI project from this budget, which you can always amend in later if you get it all done. But the treasurer is saying that removing the CI project makes the account level balances balance, even though statutorily on the ordinance, we balance at the fund level. That becomes a philosophy question for the council as to what these 5 members are comfortable with passing. So right now we have a motion on the table to pass it as presented. Is there any council member that wishes to make an amendment or a motion to amend the motion on the table?
So may I ask a clarifying question? Because what I just heard you understand, what you just articulated is how I understand it. We only have 2 options. Either we're essentially approving the rate as presented today.
No.
Or
the budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to force extra meetings for sure. I mean, if we're approving this today, what are we approving? Because you just said it, and what's the consequence? Do we have to have another meeting on the 6th? Because I keep hearing that we are not reconciled. So, and I apologize that I'm not understanding.
We can reconcile at the fund level, not the account level.
Okay.
So you could pass it now, come back, we can work on rates. I will not have enough time to work on rates prior to that. I have to get done with the auditor, and I've already put him off 2 weeks. So
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
To me, I feel like we're acting like there's something on the table that's not on the table. We either have to get into the details of the rates, right?
No.
Budget.
No,
budget.
we have to adopt the budget tonight, or not tonight, but by the 6th. And then we can do the rates. Hopefully, we could get them set before we do the fee schedule. If not, then we'll continue to work on it. But they're apples and oranges, I guess. Yeah. You can adopt at the fund level, then we can work on it. This is, I mean, he's done 12 hours worth of straight work on the rates. And if we need more information than that, I don't have time right now. I just,
So I think the key is understanding what the fund balance or fund is.
Yes.
Why are we doing this? It's
Yes.
setting up a big picture
Yeah.
of what we
Yes.
intend, our best guess of what might happen next year.
Well, and
But when you get down to the balance, to the account level, that's another tier, another more detailed in the account.
And I would have thought that our consumption would have been higher this year, but it wasn't. I mean, what we took in wasn't.
Yeah,
So
And that's
I
well
just-
So
put.
what,
that's
So
something.
that's well put, Dan, that it's the budget balances, but the accounts, we can go back. And that's what we're going to do with our water rates,
I'm going to.
right? So we're gonna have a roundtable discussion. I don't hear any opposition on council to saying that we do need to look at this in detail. But tonight, it's just the budget, right?
Right.
The fund
I
budget,
understand.
the big
So-
picture.
Yeah, the
When-
big picture budget.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sean.
Shauna, please.
So Debbie, I understand now. So, but you said you don't have time. Will we be asked to vote on rates before we get the follow-up analysis? That's the end all be all question that I'm asking.
I just don't have time before we have to get the budget
Okay,
passed. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't need to vote on rates because of some
No.
kind of rule before we get this follow-up information, because I am not prepared to do that.
Okay.
But if you're saying that we can approve today on the fund and then in January or whenever you have time, I just need to know that we will not be asked to vote on these rates until
No.
there is follow-up based off of the things that were raised today.
No, we wouldn't do that. Definitely not.
Okay, so any further questions regarding schedule? Seeing or hearing none, are there, does any council member, I know that's just one last time for the record, any council member wish to make any amendments to ordinance 546 while we are here? I am not seeing or hearing anyone. So at this time, the motion before the council is to vote on approval or rejection of ordinance 546 as presented. All those in favor of ordinance 546 as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Ordinance 546 is approved unanimously. And that leads us to public remarks. Do we have any public remarks? We have Mr. Sadler, please come on up.
Doug Sadler, 8612 East Bridgeport. I want to affirm two things, and maybe this is the way we can keep thinking when we go through this next year. Sean, the way that you handled the parking ordinances, we had this big thing, and you reduced it down to the small thing. And so it's just this new way of looking at things. Just because something's presented in some way, it doesn't have to be finished that way. And so that was good. I liked your comments about how can we slow down how much we pay Walsh Comer. In their last couple of presentations, do we pay them more when they come to present? You know, they do the engineering work and then they present. The engineering work is what we're looking for. Do we need to pay them to come and present it? They basically talk through what they put up as a document. Can't they just send us a document?
We pay them, that's their professional time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct, for the document, but do we also pay them another fee to come present the document? Or is it
Yes.
all one substance?
We
Okay.
pay them for their time.
Okay, so do we really need them to come to present the document they made? So it's a small reduction, it's not much, but small.
If council has questions, they should be here to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Mr. Vesey?
Todd Beasy, 8610 East South Riverway. Just a couple announcements that the December 6th, the Winterfest, hope to see everybody there. This Friday at the Masonic Center, 6 o'clock, Dr. Shauna Beasy will be speaking. Hope to see all of you and people behind me here. And if you're out there on YouTube or live streaming, you are invited also this Friday, Historic Millwood, the Masonic Center, 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Any other public comments, public remarks this evening?